Most people freeze when they come face to face with real power. They stutter, they sweat, they forget their own names. The smart ones run, the desperate ones grovel. But on a rain-soaked Thursday evening in Boston's North End, Maya Chen did none of those things. She looked directly into the obsidian eyes of one of the most dangerous men in the city, spoke 6 words in perfect Sicilian dialect, and changed the trajectory of 2 lives forever. And watching from across that cramped restaurant was Vincent Torino, who had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. The rain hammered against the windows of Nonna's kitchen like bullets against glass, each drop exploding into fragments before sliding down in jagged streams. Maya had been wiping down the same table for 3 minutes, her movements mechanical, precise, invisible. 24 years old, and she had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. Stained apron tied tight around her waist, dark hair pulled back in a bun so severe it stretched her features into something forgettable. Maya moved through the dinner rush like a ghost who knew exactly where every chair leg waited to trip her. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then barely above a whisper. The other waitresses called her Mouse behind her back. The customers forgot her name before she finished taking their orders. But Maya preferred it that way. Invisible meant safe. Silent meant survival. The kitchen door swung open with its usual metallic screech, and Tony Marconi emerged, carrying a tray of steaming osso buco. His gold chains caught the overhead light as he surveyed the dining room with the practised eye of a man who had seen too much. "Maya," he barked, not bothering to look at her directly. "Table 12, VIP reservation, don't screw it up." Maya's stomach clenched. Table 12 sat in the corner, with clear sightlines to every entrance and exit. Only 3 types of people requested that specific table: cops, criminals, and politicians who couldn't tell the difference. She dried her hands on her apron and approached the hostess station, where the reservation book lay open, like a confession waiting to be signed. Torino, party of 6, 7:30 p.m. Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. Everyone in the North End knew that name, even if they pretended they didn't. Vincent Torino controlled everything, from the docks to the city council, his influence spreading through Boston like spilled wine staining white cloth. And his father, Salvatore Torino, was living legend. A man who had walked out of Sicily 60 years ago with nothing but the clothes on his back and the kind of reputation that made grown men cross themselves. The front door opened with a gust of wind that rattled every piece of glassware in the restaurant. Maya felt the temperature drop 10 degrees as 5 men in charcoal suits stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room with predatory efficiency. But it was the 6th man who made Maya's breath catch in her throat. Salvatore Torino was 83 years old, but he carried himself like a king surveying his kingdom. His white hair was combed back perfectly, his moustache trimmed to mathematical precision. The suit he wore probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months, but it was his eyes that held her attention. Ancient, calculating, eyes that had seen empires rise and fall and had helped determine which would be which. Behind him walked a man Maya recognized from newspaper photos that never captured the full impact of his presence. Vincent Torino. 6 feet of controlled violence wrapped in Italian silk, his dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged on Roman coins. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, every step calculated, every glance cataloguing potential threats and opportunities. When his eyes swept across Maya, she felt exposed despite being completely ignored. The hostess, Jennifer, had gone pale as fresh snow. Her hands shook as she grabbed menus, her voice cracking as she attempted professional courtesy. "Right this way, gentlemen. Your table is ready." Maya watched the procession make its way to table 12, the other diners instinctively leaning back as they passed. Conversations died. Silverware stopped clinking against plates. Even the kitchen sounds seemed muffled, as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath. Tony appeared at Maya's shoulder, his cologne mixing with the scent of garlic and fear that now permeated the dining room. "You're up, Mouse. Don't make eye contact, don't ask questions, and whatever you do, don't say anything stupid." Maya nodded, grabbed her order pad, and walked toward table 12. Each step felt like walking through deep water, the distance stretching impossibly long. She could feel Vincent's attention like a physical weight, though when she glanced up he appeared to be examining the wine list with academic intensity. Salvatore sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands folded precisely over the white tablecloth. The other men, bodyguards, advisors, soldiers, Maya couldn't tell the difference, flanked him like human shields. Vincent sat to his right, close enough to whisper, far enough to draw a weapon if necessary. Maya approached the table and felt the familiar flutter of panic in her chest. Her social anxiety had been her constant companion since childhood, whispering poisonous suggestions about all the ways she could embarrass herself. But as she looked at Salvatore, something unexpected happened. She recognized something in his bearing, his formal posture, the way he held his shoulders. Nonna Costanza had sat exactly the same way. Maya's foster grandmother had been dead for 6 years, but suddenly she was there in the dining room, her voice echoing in Maya's memory. "Respect, Bambina, always respect. When you meet someone who has earned their years, you acknowledge it properly." Maya stopped 3 feet from the table and did something she had never done in her 2 years working at Nonna's kitchen. She looked directly into Salvatore Torino's ancient eyes and spoke. "Buonasera, Don Salvatore." Her voice was steady, clear, carrying the formal cadence of old Sicily. "Mi chiamo Maya. Sarà un onore servirla stasera." The silence that followed was so complete that Maya could hear the rain against the windows, the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Every person in the restaurant had stopped breathing. The bodyguards' hands drifted toward their jackets. Vincent's knuckles went white where they gripped his water glass, but Salvatore Torino smiled. It was a slow transformation, years of careful control melting away to reveal genuine delight. His eyes brightened, the lines around them deepening with pleasure rather than calculation. When he spoke, his voice carried the musical cadence of his homeland. "Ah, bella ragazza!" The words rolled off his tongue like warm honey. "You speak the old language. Where did you learn such beautiful manners?" Maya felt Vincent's stare boring into her like a laser, but she kept her focus on the old man. "My foster grandmother, Don Salvatore, Nonna Costanza from Palermo. She taught me that respect must be earned, but when it is earned, it should be given freely." Salvatore's smile widened. He gestured to the empty chair beside Vincent. "Sit, child. Tell an old man about this wise woman who raised you properly." "Papa?" Vincent's voice carried a note of warning. "She has work to do." But Salvatore waved him off with imperial dismissal. "The work can wait 5 minutes. How often do I meet someone who remembers the old ways?" He turned back to Maya, his expression expectant. Maya remained standing, her training warring with her curiosity. She should return to her other tables. She should maintain professional boundaries. She should become invisible again. Instead, she found herself speaking in fluent Sicilian about the woman who had saved her life by teaching her that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself. And for the first time since Nonna Costanza had died, Maya felt truly seen by another human being. Vincent Torino sat in stunned silence, watching this impossible girl transform his father from a feared don into a delighted grandfather. And deep in his chest, something that had been locked away for years began to crack open like ice breaking up in spring. The temperature in the room began to rise again, but for entirely different reasons. The gunfight was over, but the silence that followed felt more dangerous than the chaos that had preceded it. Maya stood among the bodies in Salvatore's study, her hands still shaking from adrenaline, blood spatter across her face like war paint. She'd killed a man with a crystal paperweight. had watched Vincent execute 2 others with surgical precision, and somehow the most unsettling part was how normal it felt. Vincent moved through the aftermath with practiced efficiency, checking pulses, collecting weapons, his movements those of someone who had cleaned up scenes like this before. Dom was speaking rapidly into his radio, coordinating with the security team to sweep the property for additional threats. Through the broken windows, Maya could hear sporadic gunfire growing more distant as the surviving attackers retreated into the Boston night. "Status report," Vincent said tersely, reloading his weapon. 12 hostiles down, 3 escaped on foot. We lost Rodriguez and Castellano's nephew Marcus. Dom's voice was steady, professional, but Maya caught the grief beneath the surface. These weren't just employees to him. They were family. Don Salvatore is secure in the panic room with Rosa. Tony Marconi's car is gone from the garage. Vincent's jaw clenched. He ran the moment the shooting started, probably has a plane ticket and new identity waiting somewhere warm and extradition free. Vincent looked at the dead men scattered around his father's study. Rico? In the wind. But boss, we recovered one of their radios. The chatter suggests this was just the opening move. Rico's planning something bigger, and he's got backing from families in New York and Philadelphia. Dom paused, his expression grim. They know about Maya now. Know she's important to you. This won't be the last time they come for her. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had saved Vincent's life, had proven her loyalty in blood and violence, but the cost was becoming clear. By choosing this family, by becoming someone Vincent valued enough to protect, she had painted a target on herself that would never fade. Vincent crossed to Maya, his hands gentle as he cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away blood that wasn't hers. "Are you hurt?" Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the magnitude of what had happened was hitting her in waves. She had killed someone, actually taken a human life with her own hands. The fact that it had been necessary, that the man would have murdered both her and Vincent, didn't make the weight of it any easier to bear. "Maya, look at me." Vincent's voice was soft, understanding. "You did what you had to do to survive, to protect the people you care about. There's no shame in that." "I killed him," Maya whispered, the words scraping her throat raw. "I aimed for his head and I threw that paperweight as hard as I could, and I wanted him to die." Vincent pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with fierce protectiveness. Maya could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, could smell his cologne mixed with gunpowder and the metallic scent of violence. "Good," he said quietly into her hair. "That instinct, that willingness to do whatever it takes to protect your family, that's what's going to keep you alive in this world." Maya pressed her face against Vincent's shirt, letting herself take comfort in his warmth while her mind processed the transformation she had just undergone. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, forgettable, someone who survived by avoiding conflict at all costs. Now she was a woman who could kill without hesitation when the people she loved were threatened. "Vincent," Dom interrupted carefully, "we need to move. Rico's people will regroup, maybe bring reinforcements. The estate isn't secure anymore." Vincent nodded, his arms still around Maya. "Safe house protocols. I want my father and Maya somewhere Rico can't reach while we deal with this permanently." Maya pulled back slightly, looking up at Vincent's face. "What does deal with this permanently mean?" Vincent's smile was cold, predatory, carrying the promise of retribution that had built his reputation. "It means Rico Valdez made the mistake of threatening my family, and I protect what's mine with everything I have." The possessive undertone in Vincent's voice should have concerned Maya. Instead, it sent a warm rush of something dangerously close to desire through her chest. She was his now, officially and irrevocably, and Vincent was the kind of man who would burn down half of Boston to keep her safe. They found Salvatore in the panic room, a reinforced bunker beneath the main house that looked like a cross between a luxury hotel suite and a military command center. The old man was sitting calmly in a leather chair, wearing pyjamas and a silk robe, reading a book of Sicilian poetry, as if armed assassins hadn't just tried to storm his home. "Ah, there you are," Salvatore said in Italian, looking up as Vincent and Maya entered. "Rosa tells me we had some uninvited guests. I assume you handled the situation appropriately?" Vincent kissed his father's forehead with gentle affection. "Rico won't be a problem much longer, Papa, but we need to move you somewhere safe while I clean up this mess." Salvatore's ancient eyes shifted to Maya, taking in the blood on her clothes, the hollow look in her eyes, the way she stayed close to Vincent's side as if drawing strength from his presence. "And you, Bambina? How are you handling your first real taste of our world?" Maya met Salvatore's gaze directly, calling on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm discovering I'm stronger than I thought, Don Salvatore, and more loyal." Salvatore smiled with genuine warmth. "I never doubted it. The moment you greeted me in proper Sicilian, I knew you understood the old codes, honour, family, the willingness to do whatever is necessary to protect those who matter." He reached out and patted Maya's hand with grandfatherly affection. "Welcome to the family, cara mia, truly and completely." The formal acceptance hit Maya harder than the violence had. She was part of the Torino family now, not just in employment or proximity, but in the bonds of loyalty and blood that held their world together. It was everything she had ever wanted and everything she had never dared hope for. 2 hours later, Maya found herself in a luxury hotel suite in downtown Boston, the kind of place that didn't ask questions about guests who checked in under assumed names and paid cash for extended stays. Vincent had arranged the safe house with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before, complete with armed security, medical supplies, and enough food to survive a siege. Maya was sitting on the suite's enormous bed, cleaned of blood and changed into clothes Vincent had somehow procured in her exact size, when Vincent emerged from the bathroom with a first aid kit. She hadn't realised she was injured until he pointed out the glass cuts on her arms from diving for cover during the gunfight. "Let me see," Vincent said, sitting beside her on the bed. His hands were gentle as he examined the cuts, cleaning them with antiseptic that stung worse than she expected. "You don't have to take care of me," Maya said quietly. "I know you have bigger problems to deal with right now." Vincent looked up from bandaging a particularly deep cut on her forearm. "Maya, you are not a problem to be dealt with. You are the most important thing in my world right now. Everything else, including Rico, can wait until I'm certain you're okay." Maya felt tears she hadn't expected threatening to spill over. "I don't understand how this happened. 6 months ago I was just a waitress. Nobody special, nobody important. Now people are trying to kill me because I matter to you." Vincent set aside the bandages and cupped Maya's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realised were falling. "You were always special, Maya, always important. The only thing that changed is that now you're in a position where that specialness can be recognised and valued properly. By killing people who threaten me? By whatever it takes." Vincent's voice was steady, certain, carrying no trace of doubt or apology. "Maya, I've spent my entire adult life managing calculated risks and acceptable losses. But you're not acceptable to lose, ever." Maya stared into Vincent's dark eyes, seeing the absolute truth of his words reflected there. Vincent Torino, who controlled territories and commanded armies, who could have any woman in Boston with a phone call, had chosen her. Not just as a temporary fascination or convenient companion, but as something worth protecting with his life. "Vincent," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't fully name. Vincent leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "Say it, Maya. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, say it." Maya's hands came up to rest against Vincent's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "I love you. I'm terrified and confused, and I just killed a man with a paperweight, but I love you. I love your father. I love the way you take care of your family. I love how you make me feel like I matter. And I'm not going anywhere, no matter how dangerous it gets." Vincent's smile was radiant, transforming his face from dangerous predator to the man Maya had fallen in love with, despite every rational reason not to. "I love you too, Maya Chen, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything." When Vincent kissed her, Maya tasted promise and possession, devotion and danger, everything that came with choosing to love someone whose world was built on violence and loyalty. But she also tasted home, safety, the kind of belonging she had been searching for her entire life. They were interrupted by Vincent's phone, the harsh ring cutting through the tender moment like a blade. Vincent glanced at the caller ID and sighed. "Dom, this better be good news." Maya could hear Dom's voice through the phone, tense with urgency. "Boss, we found Tony and Rico. They're holed up in a warehouse in Southie with what's left of Rico's crew. But Vincent, they're not planning to run. They're planning something bigger. We intercepted communications suggesting they've got backing for a full territorial war." Vincent's expression shifted back to predatory calculation. "How many men?" "Unknown. But boss, they've got Maya's address, her old apartment, her work schedule at Nonna's kitchen, even information about the foster kids she's been supporting. This isn't just about you anymore. They're planning to hurt everyone she's ever cared about." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. The foster kids. 3 teenagers who depended on her monthly contributions, who trusted her to be there when the system failed them. Rico was going to use innocent children to hurt her, and through her, to hurt Vincent. Vincent looked at Maya, seeing the terror and rage warring in her expression. "Where exactly is this warehouse?" "Vincent, no," Maya said immediately, recognizing the tone in his voice. "You can't go after them. That's exactly what Rico wants. He's trying to draw you into a trap." Vincent stood from the bed, his movements sharp with controlled violence. "Maya, he threatened children under your protection. In my world, that's not something you negotiate about. That's something you end permanently." Maya grabbed Vincent's wrist, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "Then we end it, together, but we do it smart, not angry." Vincent stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "We?" Maya stood as well, meeting his gaze with steady determination. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere, Vincent. That includes the dangerous parts. Rico wants to hurt me. Fine, let him try. But he's not touching those kids, and he's not destroying what we've built." Vincent studied Maya's face, seeing the transformation from protected innocent to lethal partner, and his smile was sharp with anticipation. "In that case," Vincent said, reaching for his gun, "let's go remind Rico Valdez why people fear the Torino name." 6 months later, Maya Chen stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her walk-in closet, adjusting the collar of a tailored blazer that cost more than her old monthly rent. The woman staring back at her bore little resemblance to the shy waitress who had once served tables at Nonna's kitchen while trying to remain invisible to the world. This Maya stood straight, shoulders back, chin elevated with the kind of confidence that came from surviving assassination attempts and earning respect in a world that respected very little. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek bob that framed features no longer softened by uncertainty. She wore power like other women wore perfume, and when she walked into a room now, conversations stopped for entirely different reasons than they once had. The warehouse confrontation with Rico Valdez had ended exactly as Vincent promised it would, permanently. Maya had stood beside Vincent as he put an end to 15 years of territorial disputes with 3 well-placed bullets, and she had felt nothing but satisfaction watching the man who had threatened innocent children bleed out on a concrete floor. The foster kids Maya supported never knew how close they had come to being collateral damage in someone else's war. Tony Marconi's betrayal had cost him more than just his life. Vincent had made sure Tony's death served as a message to anyone else considering disloyalty to the Torino family. The details were something Maya preferred not to dwell on, but the results were undeniable. No one questioned her position in the family hierarchy anymore. Maya? Vincent's voice carried from the bedroom they had been sharing for 4 months now, ever since the night Maya had insisted she was done pretending their relationship was purely professional. The car's here. Maya checked her appearance one final time, noting the way the blazer emphasized her figure while maintaining the authority necessary for today's meeting. She was about to conduct her first independent negotiation with a rival family, and failure was not an option. The Torino family had thrived under Maya's linguistic abilities and cultural insights. Her skills had opened doors to territories previously closed to Vincent's organization, established partnerships with families whose old-world traditions had made them suspicious of American methods. Maya could speak to Sicilian patriarchs in their native dialect, navigate the complex social protocols of Boston's Italian community, and translate not just words, but cultural contexts that had eluded previous attempts at diplomacy. Vincent was waiting in the living room of their Beacon Hill townhouse, another recent acquisition that reflected their changed circumstances. Gone was the careful separation between his world and hers. Maya lived openly as Vincent's partner now, attended family meetings, offered strategic advice that Vincent valued as much as Dom's security assessments. Nervous? Vincent asked, straightening Maya's lapels with the intimate familiarity of a man who had earned the right to such casual touches. Excited, Maya corrected, standing on her toes to kiss him briefly. The Benedetto family has been trying to expand into our territory for 6 months. Today we convinced them it's more profitable to work with us than against us. Vincent smiled with the kind of pride that made Maya's chest warm. And if they refuse? Maya's smile was sharp, predatory, carrying undertones of the woman who had killed to protect her family without hesitation. Then we remind them that the Torino family has always been very persuasive when properly motivated. The drive to the meeting took them through Boston's North End, past Nonna's kitchen, where Maya occasionally stopped to visit her former colleagues. Tony Marconi's replacement was a nephew from the old country who treated Maya with the kind of deference reserved for family royalty. The other waitresses who had once called her Mouse now competed for her attention when she came in, hoping some of her elevated status might rub off on them. Maya felt no nostalgia for her old life. Survival had never been living. The Benedetto family had requested the meeting at a restaurant in the North End, neutral territory that suggested they were serious about negotiation rather than confrontation. Maya entered the establishment with Vincent's hand resting possessively at the small of her back, the gesture both protective and proprietary. Carlo Benedetto was exactly what Maya had expected, 60-something expensive suit, the kind of old-school machismo that viewed women as decorative objects rather than legitimate players in family business. He stood as they approached, but his attention focused entirely on Vincent while dismissing Maya as irrelevant arm candy. That was his first mistake. "Vincent, good to see you," Carlo said in heavily accented English, gesturing to the table where 2 of his lieutenants waited. "I hope we can reach an understanding today that benefits both our families." Vincent settled into his chair, his posture relaxed but alert. "I'm sure we can, Carlo. But you should know that Maya speaks for the Torino family in matters of territorial negotiation. She has my complete authority to make binding agreements." Carlo's eyebrows climbed toward his receding hairline. "The girl? Vincent, with respect, this is serious business. Perhaps she should wait in the car while the men discuss—" Maya interrupted him in rapid Italian, her voice carrying the formal authority of someone who understood exactly how to navigate traditional power structures. "Don Carlo, with respect, I am not the girl. I am Maya Chen, partner to Vincent Torino, and the woman who arranged the elimination of Rico Valdez when he threatened our mutual interests. I speak 6 languages, hold a linguistics degree from Boston University, and have personally negotiated agreements with 12 families in the past 6 months. You may address me as such, or you may explain to your investors why this meeting was unsuccessful." The temperature in the restaurant dropped 10 degrees. Carlo's lieutenants shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the insult Maya had just delivered with surgical precision. In their world, respect was currency, and Carlo had just been informed he was bankrupt. Carlo recovered quickly, his expression shifting from dismissive to calculating. "My apologies, Miss Chen. I was not aware of your credentials." Maya's smile was warm, gracious, carrying no trace of the steel beneath. "Of course. Shall we discuss the territorial boundaries your family wishes to establish?" What followed was 2 hours of complex negotiation that showcased exactly why Maya had become indispensable to Vincent's organisation. She spoke to Carlo in his own dialect when she wanted to emphasise tradition, switched to formal Italian for legal terminology, and used English for the harsh realities of American business. She understood which concessions would preserve Carlo's dignity while achieving Vincent's objectives, which compromises would feel like victories to both sides. By the end of the meeting, the Benedetto family had agreed to a partnership arrangement that gave them access to Vincent's shipping connections in exchange for recognition of Torino authority over 3 disputed neighbourhoods. Everyone left the table feeling like they had won, which Maya knew was the hallmark of successful diplomacy. "Impressive," Vincent murmured as they waited for their car. "Carlo's been trying to muscle into our territory for months. You had him eating out of your hand in 2 hours." Maya adjusted her blazer, noting how natural the gesture of authority felt now. He was expecting to negotiate with someone who would try to intimidate him. Instead, he got someone who understood exactly what he needed to hear to feel respected while giving us what we wanted. Vincent pulled Maya closer, his arm around her waist as their car approached. "Have I mentioned lately that I love your brain almost as much as I love the rest of you?" Maya laughed, the sound carrying genuine joy instead of the nervous uncertainty that had once characterized her interactions with Vincent. "Almost? Okay, equally. Your brain and your body are tied for first place in my affections." Vincent's smile was warm, intimate, the expression he reserved for moments when they were just Maya and Vincent instead of crime family royalty. "Though watching you verbally dismantle Carlo Benedetto in 3 languages was definitely attractive in ways I'm still processing." The ride back to their townhouse took them past the Torino estate, where Salvatore was enjoying his best period of clarity in months. Maya's regular presence, their afternoon sessions with correspondence and family photographs, had given the old man an anchor point that kept his confusion at bay. The doctors couldn't explain it, but Vincent didn't need medical explanations. He could see the difference Maya made in his father's life, and that was enough. "Dinner tonight?" Vincent asked as they approached their home. "Rosa's making that pasta you like, and Papa mentioned wanting to show you some photographs his nephew sent from Sicily." Maya leaned against Vincent's shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the subtle fragrance of power that seemed to surround him. "Perfect. But first, I want to call the kids." The foster children Maya supported had become a family tradition. Every month she sent care packages and called to check on their progress. 2 had aged out of the system and started college with Maya's financial support. The 3rd, a 15-year-old named Carmen, showed signs of the same linguistic gifts that had transformed Maya's life. Vincent understood the importance of these connections, the way Maya's generosity toward vulnerable children reflected the values that made her worthy of his devotion. He had even suggested bringing Carmen to Boston for summer internships once she turned 18, giving her the same opportunities Maya had been denied. "How do you think Carmen's doing with her Spanish classes?" Vincent asked, making conversation that showed he paid attention to details that mattered to Maya. "Brilliantly. Her teacher says she has an intuitive understanding of grammar structure that suggests real talent." Maya smiled, thinking about the shy girl who reminded her so much of herself. "I'm thinking about arranging for her to spend a semester in Spain if her grades stay up." Vincent nodded approvingly. "Consider it done. I know people in Madrid who could arrange proper placement and supervision." Maya turned to look at Vincent fully, struck by how naturally he had incorporated her priorities into his world. 6 months ago, she had been a lonely woman working 3 jobs just to survive. Now she was part of a family that valued her contributions, protected her interests, and supported her desire to help others escape the circumstances that had once trapped her. Vincent, do you ever regret it? Bringing me into your world, letting me become important enough to be a target? Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. Maya, every choice I've made since meeting you has been about building a life worth living, instead of just maintaining an empire worth fearing. Do I regret choosing love over safety? Never. Maya felt something warm and permanent settle in her chest. Good, because I have some ideas about expanding our international connections, and they're going to require me to become even more valuable and even more of a target. Vincent's laugh was rich with anticipation. Tell me everything. As their car pulled up to the townhouse they shared, Maya began outlining plans for partnerships that would stretch from Boston to Sicily, using her linguistic skills and cultural knowledge to build bridges between Old World tradition and New World opportunity. Vincent listened with the attention of a man who had learned that his partner's ideas were worth their weight in gold. They were building something together now, something that honoured the past while embracing the future. And Maya had never been more grateful for the night she had chosen to greet an old Sicilian man in his native language, setting in motion the events that had transformed her from invisible waitress to visible queen. The morning of her wedding, Maya woke before dawn in the guest cottage she had once moved into as Vincent's employee, now transformed into a bridal suite where 5 women fussed over every detail of her appearance, like she was a Renaissance masterpiece requiring perfect restoration. Rosa directed the chaos with military precision, barking orders in rapid Italian to the hairstylist, makeup artist and seamstress who had arrived at 5 a.m. to begin the transformation of Maya Chen into Mrs. Vincent Torino. "Basta! Basta!" Rosa called out, shooing away the photographer who was trying to capture candid shots of the preparation. "The bride needs to breathe, not pose for pictures every 5 minutes. Maya caught her reflection in the full-length mirror and felt her breath catch in her throat. The woman staring back at her was someone she was still learning to recognise. The wedding gown was a masterpiece of Italian silk and French lace, custom-made by a designer Vincent had flown in from Milan specifically for this occasion. But it was the confidence in her posture, the serene certainty in her expression, that marked the most dramatic transformation. 18 months ago, Maya had been invisible, forgettable, a woman who apologised for taking up space. Today, she was about to become the wife of one of the most powerful men in Boston, the woman who would help shape the future of a criminal empire built on honour, loyalty, and the kind of love that survived assassination attempts and territorial wars. "You look beautiful, Bambina," Salvatore said softly from the doorway, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like the distinguished patriarch he had always been beneath the feared don everyone else saw. His lucid moments had become more frequent since Maya entered their lives, as if her presence provided an anchor that kept him tethered to himself. Maya turned to face the man who would walk her down the aisle, her eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude. "Don Salvatore, you look very handsome yourself." Salvatore approached slowly, his hands gentle as he adjusted the antique lace veil that had belonged to Vincent's mother. "Isabella would have loved you, cara mia. She would have seen in you what I saw that first night at the restaurant. A woman who understands that true strength comes from knowing when to be gentle and when to be ruthless." Maya felt tears threaten to spill over, carefully contained by the makeup artist's masterwork. "I hope I can be worthy of the family name." "Worthy?" Salvatore's laugh was warm, genuinely delighted. "Maya, you have made this family stronger, happier, more complete than it has been in 20 years. Vincent smiles now, really smiles. Not just the careful expression he wears for business. And me, an old man who was forgetting how to be human, remembered what joy feels like. The wedding ceremony was taking place in the estate's gardens, transformed for the occasion into something that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Vincent had spared no expense, importing flowers from Sicily, stringing lights through ancient oak trees, creating an atmosphere that honoured both his Italian heritage and Maya's preference for intimate elegance over ostentatious display. 300 guests had gathered to witness the union, a careful mix of family members, business associates, and legitimate contacts who provided cover for the more questionable attendees. Maya recognised faces from newspaper articles, men whose presence at social events usually meant the FBI would be reviewing surveillance footage for months. But today, they were simply wedding guests, offering congratulations and expensive gifts to celebrate a love story that had survived bullets and betrayal. "Ready?" Salvatore asked, offering Maya his arm with courtly grace. Maya took a deep breath, centering herself for the moment that would officially transform her from Maya Chen, former waitress and current partner, into Maya Torino, wife and co-ruler of a criminal empire. "Ready!" The processional music began, a string quartet playing a piece Vincent had commissioned specifically for their wedding, and Maya stepped through the garden doors to begin the walk that would change her life forever. The guests rose as one, turning to watch the bride's entrance, but Maya's attention focused immediately on Vincent waiting at the altar. He stood beneath an arch of white roses and Italian cypress, wearing a tuxedo that emphasized his dark hair and Mediterranean features, looking like he had stepped out of a Renaissance painting depicting power and beauty in perfect harmony. But it was the expression on Vincent's face that stole Maya's breath completely. He was looking at her like she was a miracle, like she was the answer to prayers he hadn't dared voice, like she was everything he had ever wanted and everything he had never thought he deserved. Maya walked down the aisle with her head high, her steps measured and graceful, acknowledging the smiles and nods of approval from guests who had once viewed her with suspicion or curiosity. Now they looked at her with respect, recognition of someone who had earned her place in this world through loyalty, intelligence, and the kind of courage that couldn't be faked. When Salvatore placed Maya's hand in Vincent's, the old man spoke in Sicilian, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and blessing. "Treat her as the treasure she is, figlio mio. She brings honour to our name." Vincent's response was equally formal, equally weighted with meaning. "I will protect her with my life, honour her with my devotion, and love her with everything I am." The ceremony itself was conducted in both English and Italian, reflecting the cultural bridge Maya had helped build between Vincent's American empire and his Sicilian roots. When the time came for vows, Vincent spoke first, his words carrying the intensity of someone who had learned not to take love for granted. "Maya, 18 months ago, you walked into my life speaking a language that reminded my father of home and me of possibilities I had forgotten existed. You have made me a better man, a better son, a better leader. You chose this world when you could have chosen safety. You chose me when you could have chosen anyone. Today, I choose you back, forever and completely." Maya's vows were delivered in both English and Sicilian, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the promises she was making. "Vincent, you saw me when I had spent my life being invisible. You valued me when I had learned not to value myself. You protected me when protection meant becoming a target. I choose you. I choose this family. I choose this life we're building together. Ti amo, now and always." When Vincent slipped the wedding ring onto Maya's finger, she felt the weight of it like a crown, symbol of the authority and responsibility she was accepting along with his love. The ring itself was a masterpiece, a family heirloom that had belonged to Vincent's great-grandmother, surrounded by diamonds that caught the afternoon light like captured fire. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced, and Vincent cupped Maya's face in his hands with the reverence of someone handling something infinitely precious. The kiss was soft, tender, carrying the promise of all the passionate nights and tender mornings that lay ahead of them. But it was also a declaration, witnessed by 300 people who now understood that Maya Torino was not just Vincent's wife, but his partner in every sense of the word. The reception was a masterclass in organised celebration. Vincent had hired the best caterers in Boston, but Rosa had insisted on overseeing the preparation of traditional Sicilian dishes that connected the celebration to family heritage. Tables were arranged to facilitate conversation between different factions of Vincent's organisation, carefully planned seating that turned potential tension into networking opportunities. Maya moved through the celebration like a queen holding court, switching effortlessly between languages as she conversed with guests from different backgrounds and cultures. She spoke Italian with the old-school patriarchs, Spanish with associates from South America, French with European contacts who had flown in for the occasion. Each conversation demonstrated why she had become indispensable to Vincent's operations. "Mrs. Torino," Carlo Benedetto approached with a warm smile, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine respect. "Congratulations on your wedding. I have something for you." Carlo handed Maya an envelope, heavy cream paper with her new name written in elegant script. "An invitation to my daughter's wedding next month in Sicily. She specifically requested that you attend, said she wants to meet the American woman who speaks better Italian than most Italians." Maya accepted the invitation with gracious warmth, understanding the significance of the gesture. Carlo was acknowledging her as family royalty, someone worthy of inclusion in his most personal celebrations. "I would be honoured to attend." The evening progressed with traditional Sicilian folk dancing, Vincent's cousins teaching Maya the steps to dances that connected her to centuries of family celebration. She laughed as Vincent spun her through complicated patterns, her designer gown flowing around her like liquid silk, her face bright with genuine joy. But the most meaningful moment came when Salvatore stood to offer the traditional toast, his voice strong and clear as he addressed the gathered celebration. "Family," he began in English, then switched to Italian for the formal blessing. "Tonight we celebrate not just the marriage of my son Vincent to Maya, but the addition of a daughter who has brought light back into our house. Maya speaks the language of our hearts, understands the values of our ancestors, and has proven her loyalty with her blood." Salvatore raised his glass, his ancient eyes bright with satisfaction. "To Vincent and Maya Torino, may your love be as enduring as the mountains of Sicily and as powerful as the sea that carried our family to this new world." The toast was echoed by 300 voices, a chorus of approval and blessing that officially welcomed Maya into the complex brotherhood that was Vincent's world. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself standing with Vincent on the terrace overlooking the gardens where they had just promised to love each other forever. Her wedding dress had survived hours of dancing and celebration, but her carefully styled hair had come loose, framing her face in soft waves that Vincent kept pushing back with gentle fingers. "Any regrets?" Vincent asked, his arm around Maya's waist as they watched the last of their guests saying goodbyes. Maya leaned against Vincent's chest, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the lingering fragrance of celebration. "About marrying you? Never. About the tiramisu being gone before I got seconds? Absolutely." Vincent's laugh rumbled through his chest, vibrating against Maya's back. "I'll have Rosa make you a whole tray tomorrow." "Promise?" "Promise. Along with anything else you want. New jewellery, a honeymoon in Italy, a private island, whatever makes you happy." Maya turned in Vincent's arms, looking up at the man who had transformed her life in ways she was still discovering. "I have everything I want right here. You, your father's blessing, a family that values what I contribute, work that makes me feel useful and important. What more could I possibly need?" Vincent's smile was soft, tender, carrying the kind of love that poets spent lifetimes trying to capture in words. "Nothing. We have everything." From inside the house came the sound of Rosa directing the cleanup crew, Salvatore's voice as he reminisced with elderly cousins about weddings from decades past, the comfortable chaos of family celebration winding down. Maya listened to the sounds of her new life and felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. "Vincent?" "Hmm?" Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me when everyone else looked right through me." Vincent lifted Maya's chin, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Thank you for letting yourself be seen, for choosing visibility even when it meant danger, for becoming the queen this kingdom needed." When Vincent kissed his wife for the second time that day, Maya tasted promises and possibility, partnership and passion, everything that came with choosing love over safety and visibility over survival. The shy waitress who had once served tables at Nonna's kitchen was gone forever, replaced by Maya Torino, wife, partner, and co-ruler of an empire built on honor, loyalty, and the kind of love that could survive anything the world threw at them. As Boston's autumn stars appeared overhead, Vincent and Maya began planning their future together. Two people who had found family in the most unlikely circumstances and were determined to build something beautiful from the dangerous materials of their shared world. The Queen had claimed her crown, and the kingdom had never been stronger. Salvatore Torino had not smiled like this in 20 years. Vincent watched his father's face transform as Maya spoke about her foster grandmother, the old man's eyes brightening with each perfectly pronounced Sicilian phrase. The other patrons had resumed their conversations in hushed tones, but Vincent could feel their stolen glances, their desperate curiosity about the girl who had made the untouchable Don look human. "Costanza di Marco," Salvatore repeated, rolling the name around his tongue like fine wine. "From Palermo, you said. Tell me, child, did she ever speak of the old neighbourhood, the one near the cathedral?" Maya's face lit up with recognition. "Si, Don Salvatore. She lived on Via Maqueda before she came to America. She used to tell me about the morning markets, how the fishermen would sing as they sold their catch." Maya's voice took on the musical cadence of memory. She said the sound of church bells mixed with the scent of jasmine was the closest thing to paradise she ever knew. Vincent felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. His mother had said almost identical words about that same street, that same cathedral. But his mother had been dead for 15 years, and no one in his world spoke of such things anymore. Beauty was a luxury they couldn't afford. Nostalgia was a weakness that got you killed. Yet here was this slip of a girl, making his stone-hearted father reminisce about jasmine and church bells as if they were discussing battle strategies. "Your Nonna sounds like a woman of great wisdom," Salvatore said, his voice soft with genuine warmth. "How did she come to raise you?" Maya's smile faltered for just a moment. Vincent caught the micro-expression, cataloguing it automatically. Pain, quickly suppressed. "I was 16 when the state placed me with her. She ran a boarding house for—" Maya searched for the diplomatic phrase. "For people who needed a second chance. She said broken things could be made beautiful again if someone cared enough to see their potential." Vincent's water glass cracked under the pressure of his grip. He forced his fingers to relax, but his attention never wavered from Maya's face. He recognized that particular brand of careful optimism. It was what people developed when the alternative was drowning in their own history. "And you stayed with her until?" Vincent found himself asking, despite every instinct telling him to remain silent and observe. Maya turned toward him, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Up close, Vincent could see flecks of gold in her brown irises, could read the intelligence she kept carefully hidden behind her shy demeanour. Until she died, 2 years ago. Alzheimer's. The single word hung in the air like a blade. Vincent understood immediately why Maya had recognised something familiar in his father's bearing, why she had known exactly how to approach Salvatore with the precise balance of respect and warmth. She had practiced navigating the labyrinth of a deteriorating mind. "I'm sorry for your loss," Vincent said, and meant it more than he had meant anything in months. Salvatore reached across the table and patted Maya's hand with grandfatherly affection. "She raised you well, Bambina. You have the old respect, the old courtesies. These things matter more than people understand." Maya glanced toward the kitchen, where Tony was glaring daggers in her direction. "I should take your orders now, Don Salvatore. I don't want to keep you from your meal." Of course, Salvatore waved magnanimously. "But first, tell me what your nonna would recommend from this menu. She would know what a Sicilian palate craves." Maya's entire posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her voice gained confidence, and for a moment Vincent glimpsed the woman she might have been if life had dealt her different cards. "The osso buco here is exceptional, but if you're feeling nostalgic for home, I would suggest the arancini as an appetizer. Tony makes them with saffron and real Parmigiano Reggiano, the way they do in Palermo. And the wine—" Maya glanced at Vincent's abandoned wine list. The Nero d'Avola would complement either dish perfectly. Vincent had eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants where the sommelier couldn't have delivered that recommendation with half the authority. He watched Maya explain the preparation methods in rapid Sicilian, watched his father nod approvingly at her suggestions, watched the other men at the table gradually relax as they realized this girl posed no threat beyond forcing them to witness genuine joy on their Don's face. Excellent," Salvatore declared. "We'll have exactly what you suggest. And Maya?" He waited until she met his eyes again. "When you bring our wine, I want you to tell me more about this nonna of yours. A woman who could raise such a respectful child deserves to be remembered properly." Maya's smile was radiant. "It would be my honor, Don Salvatore." She walked away with purpose, leaving Vincent staring after her with an expression he hadn't worn since childhood. Salvatore noticed immediately. "Close your mouth, figlio mio," the old man said in Italian, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," Vincent replied quietly, watching Maya navigate between tables with fluid grace, no longer the timid mouse who had approached their table 20 minutes ago. "When was the last time anyone spoke to you about home, about the real home?" Salvatore's expression grew thoughtful. "Your mother was the last one who understood. Who could talk about the jasmine and the church bells without making them sound like fairy tales?" He studied his son's face with the penetrating gaze that had built an empire. "This girl, she has the same gift. She makes the past feel like something worth preserving instead of something to be escaped." Vincent nodded, still watching Maya as she poured wine at another table. Her movements were economical, precise, professional. But now he could see the intelligence behind every gesture, the careful observation that let her anticipate needs before they were voiced. "She's not what she appears to be." "No," Salvatore agreed. "She's something much more dangerous. She's someone who could make you remember why you started building this empire in the first place." Maya returned with their wine, a bottle of Nero d'Avola that she uncorked with practiced efficiency. As she poured, Vincent noticed her hands. Steady, no trembling despite the magnitude of the table she was serving. Most people developed a visible shake when they got within 10 feet of his father. Maya's pulse might as well have been carved from marble. "Now," Salvatore said as Maya finished pouring, "tell me about the boarding house. What kind of second chances did your nonna believe in?" Maya settled into the chair Salvatore had indicated earlier, ignoring Tony's increasingly frantic signals from across the room. She took in people who had nowhere else to go, foster kids aging out of the system, immigrants who needed time to find their footing, women escaping. Maya paused delicately. Difficult situations. She said America was supposed to be the land of new beginnings, but sometimes people needed help figuring out how to begin. Vincent found himself leaning forward. "And you helped her run this place?" "I translated mostly. Legal documents, medical appointments, job applications. Nonna spoke 7 languages, but her English was—" Maya searched for the diplomatic phrase again. Colourful, not always appropriate for official business. 7 languages? Vincent's interest sharpened. In his world, language was power. The ability to understand what people thought you couldn't understand had saved his life more than once. Maya nodded, looking embarrassed by the attention. Italian, Sicilian, Spanish, French, some German, some Arabic, and English, obviously. Nonna said languages were like keys. The more you had, the more doors you could open. Vincent exchanged a look with his father. In their business, a woman who could speak 6 languages fluently was worth her weight in gold. But a woman who could speak 6 languages and navigate delicate cultural situations with elderly Sicilian men, that was something approaching priceless. "And now?" Salvatore asked gently. "After your nonna passed, what doors are you trying to open?" Maya's smile turned brittle around the edges. "Right now I'm just trying to keep the ones I have from closing, but someday—" She shrugged, the gesture encompassing dreams too large and fragile to voice in present company. Vincent felt that cold, sharp thing in his chest twist again, but this time it wasn't pain. It was recognition. He was looking at someone who understood that survival was a daily choice, that dignity was something you fought for one small victory at a time, someone who had learned to be invisible, not from cowardice, but from necessity. Someone very much like the man he had been before the weight of his father's empire had taught him to stop dreaming about jasmine and church bells. Maya rose from the table as their appetizers arrived, but Salvatore caught her wrist gently. "Maya, child, I have a feeling this won't be our last conversation. You've given an old man a gift tonight, reminding him of things worth remembering. I don't forget debts of gratitude." Maya's eyes widened slightly. In their world, having Salvatore Torino in your debt was like holding a winning lottery ticket written in blood. But she simply nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Don Salvatore. Enjoy your meal." She walked away, leaving Vincent staring into his wine-glass and wondering when the last time was that he had met someone who made him want to be better instead of more dangerous. From his position at the bar, Tony Marconi watched the interaction with growing unease. In his experience, when the Torinos took an interest in someone, that person's life got very complicated very quickly, and this particular girl looked like she had enough complications already. Vincent Torino had built his reputation on knowing everything about everyone who entered his world. By the time most people shook his hand, he already knew their mother's maiden name, their credit score, and exactly which pressure points would make them cooperative. So when he walked into his downtown office at 6 a.m. the morning after meeting Maya Chen, the first words out of his mouth were a confession of ignorance that would have shocked his enemies. "Marcus, I need everything you can find on a girl named Maya Chen, works at Nonna's kitchen, about 24, speaks perfect Sicilian." Vincent poured himself an espresso from the machine that cost more than most people's cars. "And I mean everything. Where she came from, where she's going, and why my father hasn't stopped talking about her since we left the restaurant." Marcus Delacroix looked up from his bank of computer monitors with the expression of a man who had learned not to question his boss's sudden obsessions. At 35, Marcus was the best information broker on the East Coast, a former NSA analyst who had traded government clearance for private sector money and the kind of job security that came with being indispensable to Vincent Torino. "How deep you want me to go, boss?" "Ocean floor," Vincent replied without hesitation. "Financial records, educational background, medical history, parking tickets. I want to know what she dreams about." Marcus's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. "Give me 4 hours." Vincent spent those 4 hours trying to concentrate on legitimate business and failing spectacularly. Every time he attempted to review shipping manifests or approve loan applications, his mind wandered back to the way Maya had looked when she'd smiled at his father. Not the practiced customer service smile she'd worn for the rest of her tables, but the genuine warmth that had transformed her entire face when she'd spoken about her grandmother. There had been something familiar in that expression, something that nagged at the edges of his memory like a forgotten song. At exactly 10 a.m, Marcus appeared in Vincent's office doorway with a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet. "You're not going to like this, boss." Vincent gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Hit me." Marcus opened the folder and began reading like a coroner delivering an autopsy report. Maya Elena Chen, born March 15th, 24 years ago at Boston General. Parents David Chen and Isabella Santos Chen, both deceased. Car accident on the Mass Pike when she was 12, no other living relatives. Vincent felt his jaw tighten. Orphaned at 12, no wonder she'd learned to be invisible. Bounced around the foster system for 4 years, 3 different homes, all documented as problematic placements. Last family tried to... Marcus paused, consulting his notes. Let's just say Child Services removed her quickly and the foster father faced charges. The espresso cup cracked under the pressure of Vincent's grip. He forced his fingers to relax. Go on. Age 16, placed with Costanza DiMarco in a group home setting, licensed for 8 residents, mostly older teens aging out of the system, clean inspections, excellent reputation, state funding. Marcus flipped a page. Maya thrived there. GPA jumped from 2.1 to 3.8 in 1 semester. Earned a full academic scholarship to Boston University, linguistics major with a focus on Romance languages. Vincent leaned forward. Earned or was given? Earned. Test scores put her in the 99th percentile for language acquisition. Her professors described her as exceptionally gifted and possessing an intuitive understanding of cultural context that bordered on supernatural. Marcus looked up from his notes. She was on track to graduate summa cum laude when she dropped out senior year. Why? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Costanza DiMarco was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. Maya became her primary caregiver, worked 3 jobs to cover medical expenses and keep the boarding house running. When the old lady died 2 years ago, Maya inherited nothing but debt. Vincent stood and walked to his office window, looking down at the city he controlled through fear and respect. Somewhere out there, Maya Chen was probably serving breakfast to hungover college students and retired longshoremen, invisible again, her potential buried under the crushing weight of economic necessity. Current situation? Lives in a studio apartment in Southie, $700 a month, works 40 hours a week at Nonna's Kitchen, picks up shifts at a cleaning service on weekends, tutors ESL students for cash under the table. Bank account shows she's living paycheck to paycheck, but she never misses a payment. Marcus consulted another document. Here's the interesting part. She's been sending money to 3 different foster families. Small amounts, $50 to $100 a month, but consistent for the past 2 years. Vincent turned back toward his desk. Sending money to foster families? Families with kids currently in the system, kids she knew when she was bouncing around. Looks like she's trying to make sure they have things she didn't. School supplies, birthday presents, emergency funds. Marcus shrugged. Girl makes maybe $30,000 a year and she's still playing fairy godmother to kids who aren't even related to her. Vincent felt that cold, sharp thing in his chest again, but this time it was accompanied by something else, something that felt dangerously close to admiration. Medical records. Clean bill of health, but there are some gaps, missed appointments, deferred procedures, classic pattern of someone who can't afford to be sick. Marcus closed the folder. Boss, this girl is exactly what she appears to be. Working-class kid who got dealt a shit hand and is trying to play it with dignity. No criminal connections, no debts to unsavoury characters, no secret agendas. She's just good people who happen to speak 6 languages and know how to make your father smile. Vincent returned to his desk and stared at the folder as if it contained nuclear launch codes. Everything Marcus had found painted a picture of someone who had survived experiences that would have broken weaker people, who had carved out a life of quiet service and dignity, despite having every excuse to be bitter and selfish. Someone who reminded him uncomfortably of the man he might have been if he'd had different choices. There's one more thing, Marcus added carefully. I ran her name through some unofficial databases, immigration records, displaced persons files, some international stuff. And her mother, Isabella Santos Chen, wasn't originally from Boston. She was Isabella Santos from Palermo, came to the US as a refugee in 1995. Marcus met Vincent's eyes. She was running from something, boss, or someone, changed her name, married the first decent guy she met, tried to disappear into normal American life. Vincent felt the world tilt sideways. Palermo, same neighbourhood as Costanza di Marco? Close enough that they would have known each other. In a community that small, everyone knew everyone. Marcus gathered his papers. Makes you wonder what Isabella was running from, and whether Maya knows the whole story. After Marcus left, Vincent sat alone in his office, staring out at the city and thinking about second chances and the weight of inherited secrets. His father had recognised something in Maya, something that went deeper than linguistic skill or cultural knowledge. Salvatore Torino had spent 60 years reading people's souls through their faces, and last night he had looked at Maya Chen like she was a prayer answered. Meanwhile, 3 miles away in a studio apartment that smelled of industrial disinfectant and instant coffee, Maya was having her own crisis of recognition. She had spent the morning Googling Vincent Torino and immediately regretted it. Newspaper articles about federal investigations, grainy photographs of crime scenes, speculation about his involvement in everything from racketeering to murder. She should be terrified. She should find another job, maybe leave Boston entirely. Any rational person would run as far and as fast as possible from a man whose enemies tended to disappear permanently. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way Vincent's face had softened when she'd mentioned her grandmother's death. The way he'd said, "I'm sorry for your loss," like he'd meant every syllable. The way his eyes had tracked her movement around the restaurant with an intensity that should have felt predatory but somehow felt protective instead. Maya had survived 24 years by trusting her instincts about people, and her instincts told her that Vincent Torino was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his criminal reputation. He was dangerous because he made her want things she had taught herself not to want. Security, protection, the luxury of being seen and valued by someone with the power to change her world. Maya was still lost in these dangerous thoughts when her phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello? Maya, this is Vincent Torino. We met last night at Nonna's kitchen." Maya's heart stopped, restarted, then began racing like she'd just run a marathon. "Mr. Torino, how did you get my number? I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I have a proposition that might interest you." His voice was warm, careful, the vocal equivalent of approaching a spooked horse. "My father hasn't stopped talking about you since last night. It seems you made quite an impression." Maya sank onto her second-hand couch, phone pressed against her ear like a lifeline. Don Salvatore was very kind. He was also very specific about what he wants. "Maya, how would you feel about spending some time with my father on a regular basis? As a companion, someone who can speak with him in the languages that make him comfortable, help him with correspondence to Sicily, that sort of thing." Maya's mouth went dry. "I'm not sure I understand." "I'm offering you a job, good money, flexible hours, and the chance to use those linguistic skills for something more meaningful than taking dinner orders." Vincent paused. "My father is getting older. He's starting to forget things, American things. But when he heard you speak Sicilian last night, for the first time in months he looked like himself again, like the man who built this family instead of the shadow he's been becoming." Maya closed her eyes and tried to think rationally. This was obviously too good to be true. There had to be a catch, some hidden price she couldn't yet see. But rent was due in 6 days, her car needed new tyres, and 3 foster kids were counting on their monthly care packages. What exactly would this job entail? "Afternoons mostly, maybe some evenings when we have visitors from the old country. You'd help him with letters, keep him company, make sure he stays connected to the things that matter to him." Vincent's voice grew softer. "He's a proud man, Maya. He won't admit he needs help, but he needs someone who understands where he came from and respects what he's built." Maya thought about her grandmother, about the way Alzheimer's had stolen pieces of her until only fragments remained. She thought about the loneliness that had haunted Costanza's final months, the way she'd light up whenever Maya spoke to her in Italian, as if the familiar language could bring back glimpses of the woman she used to be. "How much?" she asked quietly. "5,000 a week, plus medical benefits." Maya dropped the phone. Maya fumbled for the phone, her hands shaking as she pressed it back against her ear. "I'm sorry, did you say 5,000? Vincent's low chuckle carried through the line like warm honey. "Per week, yes. I know it sounds excessive, but my father's comfort is worth any price. And Maya, the work you'd be doing, helping him stay connected to who he is, that's not something you can put a dollar amount on." $5,000 a week. Maya's brain stuttered, trying to process the number. That was more than she made in 4 months at her current jobs combined. It was enough to pay off her credit cards, fix her car, move out of the studio apartment where the radiator clanged all night and the neighbours played music until 3 a.m. It was enough to send more than $50 a month to the kids who were still trapped in the system she'd barely escaped. It was enough to change everything. "Mr. Torino, Maya pressed her free hand against her forehead, trying to organise thoughts that felt like scattered leaves in a windstorm. "This is incredibly generous, but I need to understand what I'd be getting into. Your family's reputation is—" "Complicated," Vincent finished smoothly. "I won't insult your intelligence by pretending we're just another Boston family with old money and older secrets. But Maya, what I'm offering you is legitimate work, helping an elderly man maintain his dignity as his mind begins to fail him. Nothing more, nothing less." Maya stood and began pacing the small confines of her studio, stepping carefully around the piles of ESL textbooks and the card table that served as both desk and dining room. "And the medical benefits you mentioned?" "Full coverage, the kind of insurance that means you never have to choose between paying rent and seeing a doctor again." Vincent's voice grew gentler. "Marcus told me you've been deferring medical appointments. That stops now if you take this position." The fact that he knew about her financial situation should have terrified her. Instead, Maya felt a strange sense of relief. She was tired of pretending she wasn't drowning, tired of smiling through the exhaustion that came from working 7 days a week just to stay afloat. "I'd still want to keep my evening shifts at Nonna's kitchen," she said quietly. "I don't want to burn bridges, and I need to feel like I have options. Of course, though I suspect after a few weeks of working for us, you'll discover you have more options than you ever imagined." Maya paused her pacing. Something in his tone suggested layers of meaning she wasn't quite catching. "What aren't you telling me, Mr. Torino?" A long silence stretched between them. When Vincent spoke again, his voice carried a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "You're very perceptive. Here's what I'm not telling you. My father sees something in you that goes beyond linguistic ability. He believes you understand the old ways, the old codes of honour and respect that built our world, and in his experience, people who possess that understanding are rare and valuable." Valuable how? That remains to be seen. For now, let's focus on the immediate need. My father requires a companion who can help him navigate the confusion that comes with his condition. Someone who can speak to him in the language of his childhood, help him remember the man he was before he became the man he had to be. Vincent paused. "Are you interested?" Maya closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother's final months, the way Costanza had retreated deeper into Italian as her English deserted her. The relief in her eyes whenever Maya switched languages to meet her where she was. If she could give Salvatore Torino even a fraction of that comfort, wasn't that worth the risk? "When would I start?" "Tomorrow afternoon, if you're willing. 2 o'clock at the family estate in Lincoln. I'll send a car." Maya nearly laughed at the casual way he mentioned sending a car, as if personal drivers were as common as taxicabs. "Mr. Torino, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to give me an honest answer." "Go ahead." "Am I going to be safe? I've spent the morning reading about your family, and I understand that being connected to you, even peripherally, comes with certain risks. I need to know what I'm walking into." Vincent was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her sit down hard on her couch. Maya, I'm going to tell you something that very few people in this world know. My father built this empire not because he was hungry for power, but because he was hungry for respect. Respect for his family, his culture, the code of honor he brought with him from Sicily. Every decision he made, every line he crossed, was in service of protecting something precious from being forgotten or destroyed. Maya found herself leaning forward, drawn into the story despite herself. But empires built on fear require constant maintenance. You have to keep proving you're dangerous, keep reminding people why they should be afraid of you. And somewhere along the way, the man who started this journey to protect something beautiful became someone who could only maintain it through violence. Maya heard the pain in Vincent's voice, the weight of inherited choices and their consequences. Now he's forgetting. The English comes harder, the American mannerisms feel foreign, and what remains is the man he was before he became what Boston needed him to be. He needs someone who can see that original man and treat him with the dignity he deserves, not the fear he spent 60 years cultivating. And you think I'm that person? I think you're someone who understands that survival sometimes requires wearing masks, but that underneath every mask is a human being who just wants to be known and accepted for who they really are. Vincent's voice grew softer. As for your safety, you'll be under my personal protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens something I value, and I protect what I value with everything I have. The possessive undertone in his voice should have set off every alarm bell in Maya's head. Instead, it sent a warm curl of something dangerously close to desire through her chest. She had been taking care of herself for so long that the idea of someone else shouldering that burden felt like a fantasy too dangerous to entertain. There's one more thing, Vincent continued. This position comes with certain discretion requirements. You'll see things, hear conversations, meet people who prefer their privacy protected. I need to know you understand the importance of keeping family business within the family. Maya thought about the boarding house, about the women who had arrived with black eyes and false names, about the unspoken agreement that certain stories never got told to certain people. I understand the value of discretion, Mr. Torino. Some people's safety depends on other people's silence. Exactly, Vincent sounded pleased. So, Maya Chen, are you ready to change your life? Maya looked around her studio apartment, at the stack of unpaid bills on her card table, at the photograph of her grandmother that was the only decoration she could afford. She thought about the foster kids who counted on her monthly contributions, about the dreams she'd put on hold to survive, about the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Then she thought about Salvatore Torino's face when she'd spoken to him in Sicilian, the way he'd looked at her like she was a gift he hadn't dared hope for. Yes, she said quietly, I'm ready. Excellent. I'll have Marcus send you the employment paperwork and the address. The car will pick you up at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. Vincent paused. Maya, thank you. You have no idea what this means to my family. After Vincent hung up, Maya sat in her silent apartment trying to process what had just happened. In the space of a single phone call, her life had pivoted from barely surviving to something approaching thriving. The rational part of her mind whispered warnings about gifts that seemed too good to be true, about the price that might eventually come due for Vincent Torino's generosity. But the part of her that had spent 12 years learning to read people's intentions beneath their words told her something different. Vincent Torino was dangerous, yes. His world was violent and unforgiving, absolutely. But his offer to her was genuine, born from a son's love for his failing father and recognition of her unique ability to provide something money couldn't buy. Maya walked to her small window and looked out at the grey Boston afternoon. Somewhere across the city, Vincent Torino was probably already making arrangements for her new life, setting wheels in motion that would carry her into a world she'd only read about in newspapers and crime novels. Tomorrow afternoon, she would walk into the Torino family estate and begin the most dangerous job of her life. She would help an aging Don remember who he was before he became legend. speak to him in the language of his homeland, and try to give him back some small piece of the dignity that time and illness threatened to steal. And she would do it all under the protection and growing fascination of a man whose attention felt like standing too close to a fire, warming and terrifying in equal measure. Maya had spent her entire life being invisible, surviving by staying small and unnoticed. But Vincent Torino saw her, really saw her, and wanted to give her a chance to be something more than she'd ever dared imagine. The question was whether she was brave enough to let him. The car that picked up Maya at exactly 1:30 was not what she had expected. Instead of the black sedan with tinted windows she'd imagined, Vincent sent a silver Mercedes with a driver who introduced himself as Carlo and offered her bottled water and Italian pastries for the 40-minute drive to Lincoln. Maya sat in leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent and tried to calm the butterflies that had taken up permanent residence in her stomach. The Torino estate revealed itself gradually as they turned through wrought-iron gates that opened silently at their approach. Maya pressed her face to the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. The driveway curved through perfectly manicured grounds, past fountains and flower gardens that looked like something from a museum postcard. The main house sat at the centre of it all, like a Mediterranean villa transported to New England, all creamstone and red tile roofs, with ivy climbing the walls in careful patterns. "First time seeing the estate, miss?" Carlo asked, catching her expression in the rear-view mirror. "It's beautiful," Maya managed, wondering how many lifetimes of her current salary it would take to afford even the gardening bills for a place like this. "Mr. Vincent, he's been looking forward to your arrival. Don Salvatore, too. They've been preparing all morning." The car stopped in front of a set of massive wooden doors that looked old enough to have been carved in Italy and shipped piece by piece across the Atlantic. Before Maya could reach for the handle, the passenger door opened and Vincent Torino appeared, dressed in charcoal grey slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. In the afternoon sunlight, away from the dim restaurant lighting, Maya could see the full impact of his presence. Dark hair that caught gold highlights, olive skin that spoke of Mediterranean heritage, and those obsidian eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of her appearance and file it away for future reference. Maya. His smile was warm, genuine, carrying none of the predatory calculation she'd expected from newspaper photos. "Welcome to our home." Maya stepped out of the car and immediately felt underdressed in her best khaki slacks and navy blouse, the kind of outfit that looked professional at Nonna's kitchen, but felt shabby next to Vincent's effortless elegance. "Mr. Torino, thank you for all of this." "Vincent, please, we're going to be working together after all." He gestured toward the house. "Come on, let me show you around before we introduce you to the controlled chaos that is my father's daily routine." The interior of the house took Maya's breath away. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, marble floors covered with Persian rugs that probably had their own insurance policies, and artwork that belonged in galleries rather than private homes. But it was the details that caught her attention. The family photographs clustered on side tables, the well-worn leather chairs positioned for conversation, the scent of garlic and basil that suggested someone was actually cooking in the enormous kitchen. "This doesn't feel like what I expected," Maya said without thinking, then immediately worried she'd been rude. Vincent laughed, a rich sound that echoed off the marble floors. "What did you expect? Black leather furniture and a portrait of Al Capone?" Maya felt heat creep up her neck. "I don't know. Something more intimidating, I guess." "My father always said that a man's home should reflect the life he wants to live, not the life he has to live outside these walls. This house was built for family gatherings, for children running through the halls, for the kind of meals that last 3 hours because no one wants the conversation to end." Vincent's expression grew thoughtful. "Of course, that was before my mother died, before it became just my father and me rattling around in all this space." Maya heard the loneliness in his voice and recognised it immediately. She'd spent enough years in houses that were supposed to feel like homes, but never quite managed it. "How long has it been since your mother passed?" 15 years. Vincent led her down a hallway lined with photographs, most featuring a stunning dark-haired woman with Salvatore's intelligent eyes and Vincent's sharp cheekbones. Cancer. She fought for 2 years, but... He shrugged with practiced casualness that didn't fool Maya for a second. "I'm sorry, she looks like she was beautiful." She was, and smart, smarter than any of us really. She could speak 4 languages, negotiate peace between feuding families, and still have dinner on the table by 6 o'clock. Vincent stopped in front of a photograph of his parents dancing at what looked like a wedding, both of them laughing at something off camera. "She's the one who taught me that real power comes from earning respect, not demanding it." Maya studied the photograph, noting the way Salvatore looked at his wife like she hung the moon. "She would have liked the work I'm doing with your father." "She would have loved you," Vincent said quietly, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, she would have appreciated what you're doing for him." But Maya had heard what he'd said first, and the warmth in his voice made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with nervousness. Vincent cleared his throat and resumed walking. "Speaking of which, let me introduce you to the security protocols. Nothing dramatic, but there are some basic rules for everyone's safety." They stopped at a control room that looked like something from a spy movie, banks of monitors showing different angles of the property, sophisticated equipment Maya couldn't begin to identify. A mountain of a man with greying hair and intelligent eyes stood as they entered. "Maya, this is Dom Castellano, head of security. Dom, Maya Chen." Dom's handshake was firm but gentle, and his smile was surprisingly warm for someone whose job was presumably keeping dangerous people away from the family. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Chen. Mr. Vincent tells me you'll be working with Don Salvatore." "I hope so," Maya replied. "Vincent mentioned some security protocols I should know about." "Nothing complicated. You'll get a badge with a chip that opens the doors you need and keeps the others locked. If there's ever an emergency, you follow the green lights to the nearest safe room and stay there until someone from the family comes to get you." Dom handed her a sleek white card on a lanyard. "Your car, your apartment, your regular routines, they'll all have a light security presence from now on. Nothing intrusive, just making sure you stay safe." Maya stared at the badge, the reality of her situation hitting her like cold water. She was officially part of Vincent Torino's world now, with all the protection and surveillance that entailed. "Security presence?" Vincent stepped closer, his voice gentle but serious. "Maya, I meant what I said yesterday about protecting what I value. Anyone who knows you work for this family becomes a potential target for people who want to hurt us. The security is for your peace of mind as much as ours." Maya nodded, clipping the badge to her shirt with fingers that trembled only slightly. She had known this job would change her life, but she was beginning to understand that the changes went far beyond a bigger paycheck. "Now," Vincent said, his tone lightening, "ready to meet your new boss." They found Salvatore in a sun-drenched study lined floor to ceiling with books in multiple languages. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, wearing a perfectly pressed white shirt and reading glasses that made him look more like a distinguished professor than a feared crime boss. When Maya entered, his face lit up with the same warm recognition she remembered from the restaurant. "Ah, la mia piccola professoressa," he said, rising from his chair with courtly grace. "My little professor, you came." "Buongiorno, Don Salvatore," Maya replied, automatically switching to Italian. "Thank you for trusting me with this opportunity." "Bah, trust." Salvatore waved dismissively. "Trust is for business arrangements. This is family." He gestured to a comfortable chair positioned next to his desk. "Come, sit. Vincent tells me you will help an old man remember how to write properly to his cousins in Palermo." Maya settled into the chair and immediately noticed the stack of correspondence on Salvatore's desk. Letters in various languages, some typed, some handwritten, all bearing the formal structure of important communications. You've been keeping in touch with family in Sicily? Trying to, Salvatore said with a slight frown. But the English, it creeps into everything now. I write a letter and it sounds like a businessman instead of a brother. You understand? The heart gets lost in translation. Maya picked up one of the letters, scanning the careful Italian script. She could see exactly what Salvatore meant. The grammar was perfect, the information conveyed clearly, but the warmth and personality that should have made it a family letter had been buried under formal language. "Would you like me to help you rewrite this one?" she asked gently. "Make it sound more like you're talking to your cousin Giuseppe instead of negotiating a contract?" Salvatore's smile was radiant. "Esatto, exactly. This is what I need." Maya spent the next hour working with Salvatore to transform his stilted formal Italian into the warm, colloquial Sicilian of his childhood. As they worked, she watched his posture change, his voice grow more animated, his eyes brighten with memories triggered by familiar phrases and expressions. It was like watching someone remember how to be themselves after years of playing a role. Vincent lingered in the doorway, ostensibly reviewing security reports but actually mesmerized by the transformation taking place at his father's desk. He had watched Salvatore retreat deeper into the rigid formality of his public persona as his English became less reliable, had seen him grow frustrated with his inability to express himself naturally in any language. But with Maya, the old man was laughing, gesturing expressively, telling stories about his childhood in Palermo that Vincent hadn't heard in years. "Vincent!" Salvatore called suddenly, switching back to English with effort. "Come here. Maya has found a photograph of your great-uncle Roberto, the one who taught me to make wine." Vincent approached the desk where Maya was holding an old black-and-white photograph that had been tucked into one of the letters. A young man in work clothes stood next to enormous wooden barrels, grinning at the camera with unmistakable family features. "He looks like you," Maya said, glancing up at Vincent with a smile that made something warm unfurl in his chest. "Everyone says that," Vincent replied, leaning closer to get a better look at the photograph. Maya's hair smelled like vanilla and something floral, clean and simple, and utterly unlike the expensive perfumes worn by every other woman in his orbit. "Papa, I thought all of Uncle Roberto's photographs were lost in the war." "I thought so too, but Giuseppe, he found this one in their mother's things. He sent it to remind me of the old stories, the old ways of making wine." Salvatore's eyes grew distant with memory. "Roberto, he had magic hands, could make wine from grapes that other men would throw away. Said the secret was treating each batch like it was meant for angels." Maya looked up at Vincent, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Do you make wine here?" Vincent felt his lips curve into a genuine smile. "We have a small vineyard on the property. Nothing commercial, just enough for family celebrations. Would you like to see it?" "I'd love to." And there it was, the moment Vincent had been waiting for without knowing it. Maya Chen, looking at him with genuine interest rather than fear, asking about his family's traditions instead of his reputation, making his father laugh in a language that made the old man young again. Vincent had built his life on calculated risks and carefully measured rewards. But as Maya smiled up at him in the afternoon sunlight streaming through his father's study, he realized he was about to take the biggest gamble of his life. He was going to let himself fall for someone who could either save his family or destroy it completely. 3 weeks into her new routine, Maya had settled into a rhythm that felt more natural than anything she'd experienced since her grandmother's death. Mornings were her own, spent catching up on sleep and handling the mundane tasks of normal life. Afternoons belonged to Salvatore, hours spent in his sun-filled study translating correspondence, reading Italian newspapers aloud, and listening to stories about a Sicily that existed more in memory than reality. Evenings she still worked at Nonna's kitchen, maintaining the connection to her old life that kept her grounded in who she had been before Vincent Torino changed everything. The Torino estate had become familiar territory. Maya knew which hallway led to the kitchen where Vincent's housekeeper, Rosa, would slip her homemade biscotti when she thought no one was looking. She knew that Salvatore preferred to work by the window that faced east toward the gardens, where he could watch the light change throughout the afternoon. She knew that Vincent had a habit of appearing in the study doorway around 4 o'clock, ostensibly to check on his father, but actually to watch Maya work with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. What Maya didn't know was that her presence had made the Torino family a target for someone who had been waiting years for exactly this kind of opportunity. Rico Valdez had been nursing his hatred for the Torinos for 15 years, ever since Vincent had publicly humiliated him over a disputed territory deal that had cost Rico both money and reputation. 15 years of watching the Torino empire expand while his own organisation struggled to maintain relevance in Boston's changing underworld. 15 years of planning the perfect revenge against a family that seemed untouchable. Until Maya Chen started showing up at the estate every afternoon like clockwork. Rico had been watching the compound for weeks, noting the patterns, the security rotations, the small vulnerabilities that came with any routine. And Maya represented the biggest vulnerability of all. She wasn't family by blood, wasn't protected by the same ironclad loyalty that surrounded Vincent and Salvatore. She was an outsider who had somehow gained access to the heart of their operation, and that made her both a weakness to be exploited and a message to be sent. Maya was completely unaware of being watched as she sat in Salvatore's study on a Thursday afternoon in early October, helping him compose a letter to his nephew in Palermo. The older man had been having one of his clearer days, his English more reliable, his memories sharper. They had spent an hour going through old photographs, Salvatore telling stories about the people and places that had shaped his youth. "This one," Salvatore said, pointing to a sepia-toned image of a young woman in a wedding dress. "This was my sister Francesca. She married a baker, had 7 children, lived to be 93. She wrote to me every week for 40 years, even after my life here became complicated." Maya studied the photograph, noting the family resemblance in the intelligent eyes and stubborn chin. "You miss her." "Every day. She died 5 years ago, but her son Giuseppe still writes. Not the same, though. Brothers and sisters, they share things that children cannot understand." Salvatore's voice grew wistful. "She knew the boy I was before I became the man Boston needed me to be." Maya had learned to recognize these moments when Salvatore's carefully constructed persona slipped, revealing glimpses of the homesick immigrant who lived beneath the fearsome Don. She was reaching for a fresh sheet of paper to help him write to Giuseppe when the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The change was so sudden and visceral that Maya looked up, expecting to see a window had opened or the air conditioning had malfunctioned. Instead, she saw a man standing in the study doorway who definitely did not belong in the Torino estate. Rico Valdez was everything Vincent Torino was not. Where Vincent moved with fluid grace, Rico strutted with compensatory swagger. Where Vincent's suits were tailored to understated perfection, Rico's clothing screamed expensive but had no sense of style. Where Vincent's presence commanded respect through quiet authority, Rico demanded attention through theatrical intimidation. "Well, well," Rico said, his voice carrying the artificial bonhomie of a predator pretending to be friendly. "Don Salvatore, you're looking well for a man who's supposed to be losing his mind." Maya felt Salvatore stiffen beside her, his hand moving instinctively toward the desk drawer where she had noticed he kept an old-fashioned letter opener. The transformation from gentle grandfather to dangerous Don happened so quickly it made Maya's head spin. "Rico," Salvatore's voice could have frozen mercury, "you were not invited." "Oh, but I was, by the lovely lady here." Rico's smile turned predatory as he focused on Maya. "Maya Chen, isn't it? The little waitress who's been playing house with Boston's most dangerous family." Maya's blood turned to ice water. She had never seen this man before in her life, but he knew her name, knew her background, knew exactly how to make her feel exposed and vulnerable. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Rico laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "No confusion, sweetheart. I know exactly who you are. Foster kid bouncing around the system until some Sicilian old lady took you in, dropped out of college to play nursemaid, working 3 jobs just to keep your head above water until Prince Charming here offered you a way out." Each word hit Maya like a physical blow. Rico had done his homework, had dissected her life down to its most painful details, and was now wielding them like weapons. Beside her, Salvatore's breathing had grown shallow and rapid, the stress of the confrontation triggering the confusion that always lurked at the edges of his consciousness. "What do you want, Rico?" Salvatore asked, but Maya could hear the slight slur in his words, the way his accent became thicker when his English started failing him. "What I've always wanted: respect, recognition, a seat at the table that you and your boy have kept me from for 15 years. Rico stepped further into the study, his movement casual, but predatory. "But mostly, I want Vincent to understand that his family isn't as untouchable as he thinks." Maya realized with crystalline clarity that she was not just witnessing this confrontation. She was the point of it. Rico had come here to hurt Vincent by hurting someone Vincent cared about, and Maya had walked into the Torino world with a target painted on her back. "You need to leave," Maya said, standing slowly from her chair. Her voice was steadier than she felt, but her heart was racing like a trapped bird. "Now." Rico's smile widened. "Or what? You'll call security? Scream for help? Here's the thing about the Torino estate, sweetheart. It's big and it's well insulated, and Vincent is in meetings downtown for the next 2 hours. Plenty of time for us to get properly acquainted." The threat was unmistakable. Maya felt fear claw at her throat, but underneath it was something else, something that had been forged in foster homes where the strong preyed on the weak, where survival meant learning when to run and when to stand your ground. Maya stepped between Rico and Salvatore's chair. "You want to send Vincent a message?" Her voice was steady, cold, carrying undertones of authority she hadn't known she possessed. "Here's one for you. Touch his father, and he'll hunt you down like the coward you are. Touch me, and he'll make sure you disappear so completely that your own mother won't remember your name." Rico's expression shifted from predatory confidence to surprise calculation. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected from a frightened waitress. Big words from a little girl who's in way over her head. Maybe, but I'm not the one who had to break into someone else's house to feel important. Maya took another step forward, putting herself fully between Rico and Salvatore. "You want respect. Try earning it instead of demanding it like a child throwing a tantrum." The insult hit its mark. Rico's face flushed red with rage, his carefully constructed intimidation facade cracking to reveal the insecure bully underneath. "You have no idea who you're talking to, you worthless little—" He reached for Maya's wrist, intending to grab her, shake her, teach her the kind of lesson that would put her back in her place. What he didn't expect was for Maya to react like someone who had spent years learning to defend herself against men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Maya twisted away from Rico's grasp with fluid efficiency, her movement bringing her closer to Salvatore's desk and the heavy crystal paperweight that sat next to the old man's correspondence. Her fingers closed around it as Rico lunged forward again, his face twisted with fury at being defied by someone he considered beneath his notice. "Nobody touches what's mine." The voice came from the study doorway, low and deadly, carrying the kind of cold rage that made smart people run in the opposite direction. Vincent Torino stood framed in the entrance to his father's sanctuary, and Maya had never seen anything more beautiful or more terrifying in her life. Vincent's suit was still perfectly pressed, his hair still perfectly styled, but his eyes were obsidian chips of controlled violence. He moved into the room with predatory grace, each step calculated to put him between Rico and the 2 people Rico had been threatening. Vincent, Rico tried to summon his earlier bravado, but his voice cracked slightly. I was just having a conversation with your father and his assistant. Is that what you call breaking into my home and threatening my family? Vincent's voice never rose above conversational volume, but the menace in it was unmistakable. Because I call it the last mistake you'll ever make. Maya watched Vincent transform from the gentle man who had shown her family photographs into something elemental and dangerous. This was the Vincent Torino that newspaper articles tried to capture, the one whose reputation kept other predators at bay through fear alone. Your family? Rico sneered, but Maya could see the sweat beading on his forehead. She's just some waitress you're paying to babysit the old man. Don't pretend she means anything more than... Vincent moved so fast that Maya barely saw the blow that sent Rico staggering backward into the bookshelf. The sound of Rico's head connecting with mahogany was wet and final. She means everything, Vincent said quietly, standing over Rico's crumpled form. And if I ever see you near her again, I'll bury you so deep they'll need archaeologists to find the pieces. Rico tried to stand, blood streaming from his nose, his expensive suit torn and rumpled. This isn't over, Vincent. You can't protect her forever. Vincent smiled, and Maya realized that she had never truly understood the meaning of the word predatory until this moment. Rico, you misunderstand the situation. I'm not protecting her from you. Vincent glanced at Maya, who was still holding the crystal paperweight like a weapon, her stance balanced and ready for violence. Her dark eyes blazed with the same cold fury that had gotten her through years of survival, and Vincent felt something shift permanently in his chest. I'm protecting you from her. Maya's hands were still shaking 2 hours after Rico Valdez had been escorted off the property by 3 of Dom's security team. Not from fear exactly, but from the adrenaline crash that came after preparing to fight for her life with a crystal paperweight. She sat in the estate's kitchen, nursing a cup of tea that Rosa had pressed into her hands, watching Vincent pace back and forth like a caged predator while he conducted a series of increasingly terse phone calls. I don't care what it costs, Vincent was saying into his phone, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made grown men nervous. I want to know every place Rico's been in the past month, everyone he's talked to, every debt he owes and every favour he's called in, and I want it by morning. Maya watched him move, noting the controlled violence that hummed beneath his perfectly tailored exterior. This was Vincent in his element, orchestrating responses to threats with the same precision other people used to plan dinner parties. It should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself studying the line of his shoulders, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned over to examine security footage on Dom's laptop. Salvatore had recovered quickly once Rico was removed from his study, the old man's confusion clearing like fog in sunlight. He had spent 20 minutes apologizing to Maya for exposing her to danger, his distress genuine and heartbreaking. Maya had reassured him repeatedly that she was fine, that she understood the risks of working for his family, that she wasn't going anywhere. But she could see the worry in his ancient eyes, the fear that his presence in her life had made her a target. Papa's blaming himself, Vincent said quietly, ending his call and joining Maya at the kitchen counter. I can see it in his face. Maya looked up at Vincent, noting the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his jaw that suggested he was fighting the same self-recrimination. Are you blaming yourself too? Vincent's smile was rueful. Every decision I've made in the past 15 years has been calculated to keep my family safe. Bringing you into our world, letting you become important to us, that was the first purely selfish choice I've made since my mother died. He sat down across from Maya, his hands folded on the granite countertop. Rico was right about one thing. You are a vulnerability now. My vulnerability. Maya set down her teacup and met Vincent's gaze directly. I'm not helpless, Vincent. I know you saw that today. I saw you ready to brain a man twice your size with a paperweight. Yes, Vincent's expression grew thoughtful. Where did you learn to move like that? The way you twisted away from Rico's grab, that wasn't instinct, that was training. Maya felt heat creep up her neck. She had hoped Vincent hadn't noticed her defensive reflexes, hadn't catalogued the way she'd automatically shifted her weight and positioned herself for maximum leverage. Foster system teaches you things, how to protect yourself when the adults who are supposed to keep you safe don't always manage it. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Someone hurt you. It wasn't a question, and Maya appreciated that he didn't make her spell out details that still sometimes visited her dreams. Someone tried to. I made sure it didn't happen again. Good. The single word carried a world of approval and understanding that made Maya's chest warm. Vincent reached across the counter and covered her hand with his, the contact sending electricity up her arm. Maya, I need you to know that what happened today changes things. Rico won't give up, and his organization has connections that make them more dangerous than their reputation suggests. I can't ask you to stay in a situation that puts your life at risk. Maya stared at their joined hands, Vincent's fingers warm and calloused against her skin. 6 weeks ago she had been invisible, forgettable, living paycheck to paycheck and convinced that safety meant staying small and unnoticed. Now she was sitting in a kitchen that cost more than most people's houses, holding hands with one of the most dangerous men in Boston, being told she had become important enough to be worth killing. "Are you firing me?" she asked quietly. "I'm giving you an out. Full severance pay, security detail until things with Rico are resolved, letters of recommendation that will open doors you didn't know existed." Vincent's thumb traced across her knuckles, the gesture both comforting and possessive. "You could be in California by tomorrow night, starting over somewhere Rico's reach can't find you." Maya thought about California, sunshine and anonymity, a chance to finish her linguistics degree, maybe find work that used her language skills without requiring her to navigate the complexities of organized crime. It would be the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that 12-year-old orphan Maya would have made without hesitation. But 12-year-old Maya had never seen Salvatore's face light up when she read him letters from Sicily in perfect dialect. Had never felt the satisfaction of helping an old man remember who he was beneath the legend he'd been forced to become. Had never experienced the intoxicating rush of being seen and valued by someone like Vincent Torino. "What if I don't want an out?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was choosing. Vincent went very still. "Maya, you don't understand what you're saying. This isn't temporary danger that will blow over in a few weeks. By staying here, by becoming part of this family, you're choosing a life where people like Rico will always see you as a target. And you're choosing a life where you have to worry about protecting me." Maya turned her hand over, so their palms pressed together, her fingers interlacing with his. "I'm not naive, Vincent. I know what your world looks like from the outside, and I know what it costs to live in it. But I also know that your father hasn't had a confused episode in 3 weeks, that he's writing letters to family in Sicily who haven't heard from him in years, that he laughs when we work on his correspondence because someone finally understands the language of his heart." Vincent's grip on her hand tightened. "That's not enough reason to risk your life." "Maybe not, but this is." Maya leaned forward slightly, close enough to see the gold flecks in Vincent's dark eyes, close enough to smell his cologne and the subtle scent of danger that seemed to cling to him like smoke. "I've been invisible my entire life, Vincent. Foster kid, waitress, the girl everyone forgets 5 minutes after meeting her. But with your family, I'm not invisible anymore. I matter. What I do makes a difference, and maybe that's selfish, but I'm not ready to give it up." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through surprise, concern, and something that looked dangerously close to wonder. "You're choosing this, really choosing it, knowing what it means." "I'm choosing you," Maya said quietly, the words hanging between them like a bridge neither could cross without changing everything. "All of you, your father, this house, the work we do together. The way you make me feel like I'm worth protecting, I'm choosing to stay and see what happens next." Vincent was silent for so long that Maya began to worry she had misread the situation, had confused professional gratitude with personal interest. But then Vincent lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, his lips warm against her skin. "In that case," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "we need to talk about making some changes. If you're staying, if you're really choosing this life, then you're not going back to that studio apartment in Southie. It's too exposed, too far from the estate, too difficult to secure properly." Maya felt her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. "Are you asking me to move in here?" "I'm asking you to let me keep you safe the way you deserve to be kept safe. There's a guest cottage on the property, completely private, fully furnished. Rosa's been dying to have another woman around to spoil with her cooking." Vincent's smile was tentative, hopeful. "And I'd sleep better knowing you're behind our security perimeter instead of 20 miles away in an apartment building where anyone could walk in." Maya thought about her studio apartment with its broken radiator and paper-thin walls, where she could hear her neighbour's television through the bathroom vent and the couple upstairs fighting at 2 a.m. Then she thought about the guest cottage she'd glimpsed during her tour of the estate, a small stone building with its own garden and enough space for all her belongings twice over. "Would I still work at Nonna's kitchen in the evenings?" "If that's what you want, though I suspect after a few weeks of living here you might discover you have other options." Vincent's thumb resumed its hypnotic tracing across her knuckles. "Maya, I'm not trying to control your choices or limit your independence. I'm trying to give you the freedom to make choices without constantly looking over your shoulder." Maya felt something settle in her chest, a sense of coming home that she hadn't experienced since her grandmother's boarding house. "When would I move?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing. I'll have people pack your apartment, transfer your utilities, handle all the logistics. You won't have to lift a finger." Vincent paused, his expression growing serious. "But Maya, once you do this, once you move on to this property and become officially part of this family, there's no pretending you're just an employee anymore. Everyone will know you matter to us. That makes you valuable. But it also makes you a permanent target." Maya thought about Rico's sneering face, about the way he'd spoken about her like she was disposable, about the moment when she'd realised that Vincent's protection came with a price she'd have to pay in constant vigilance. Then she thought about Salvatore's grateful smile when she helped him remember how to express love in the language of his childhood, about Vincent's gentle patience with his father's confusion, about the way this dangerous, complicated family had made room for her without asking her to change who she was. "I understand the risks," Maya said, squeezing Vincent's hand. "And I'm staying anyway." Vincent lifted their joined hands again, this time pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers up her arm. "Then welcome home, Maya Chen." From the doorway, Salvatore watched his son hold hands with the young woman who had brought laughter back into their house, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to hope that the Torino family might survive long enough to produce grandchildren who would grow up knowing both love and honour. Outside, Boston's autumn rain began to fall against the windows, but inside the estate's warm kitchen, 3 people who had found family in the most unlikely circumstances began planning for a future that would either save them all or destroy them completely. Maya had been living in the guest cottage for exactly 2 weeks when Vincent left for New York, and she was beginning to understand why people killed for this kind of luxury. The cottage was everything Vincent had promised and more: exposed wooden beams, a fireplace that actually worked, a kitchen with granite countertops, and appliances that didn't require percussive maintenance. For the first time since her grandmother's death, Maya had fallen asleep without mentally calculating utility bills or wondering if her neighbour's domestic disputes would wake her at 3 a.m. But luxury came with responsibility, and Vincent's 3-day business trip meant Maya was Salvatore's primary caregiver in ways that went far beyond translation services. Rosa, "Did Don Salvatore take his evening medication?" Maya asked, finding the housekeeper in the main kitchen as she prepared dinner for the reduced household staff. Rosa looked up from the soup she was stirring, her weathered face creased with concern. "He said he did, but—" She shrugged expressively. "Some days he remembers, some days he forgets, some days he remembers taking it, but takes it again anyway." Maya nodded, making a mental note to implement a pill organizer system when Vincent returned. Managing Salvatore's medications was delicate territory. The old man fiercely guarded his autonomy, and too much supervision made him defensive and confused, but Vincent's absence had highlighted how much day-to-day care his father actually needed, care that had been invisible when Vincent was handling it seamlessly in the background. "I'll check on him after dinner," Maya said, accepting the bowl of minestrone Rosa handed her. "He was having a good day earlier. We finished 3 letters to his family in Palermo." "Good, good. He's happiest when he's writing to the old country. Makes him remember who he was before." Rosa gestured vaguely toward the windows, encompassing the estate, the security cameras, the weight of empire that surrounded them all. Maya was carrying her soup toward Salvatore's study when she noticed the guest bathroom door standing ajar. Not unusual in itself, except that she could see light coming from inside, and she was certain she had turned off all the lights when she'd used it earlier. Probably Rosa or one of the cleaning staff, but Vincent's security briefings had made her hyper-aware of details that seemed out of place. She set her soup on a side table and approached the bathroom quietly, intending to simply turn off the forgotten light. Instead, she found herself staring at a cell phone sitting on the marble countertop, its screen displaying a text conversation that made her blood turn to ice. The phone belonged to Tony Marconi. She recognized the distinctive case, a gaudy gold thing, with his initials embossed in fake diamonds that he was inexplicably proud of. But it was the conversation displayed on the screen that stopped Maya's heart completely. "Package confirmed for delivery tomorrow night. Remove obstacles as discussed. Payment on completion." The response was equally chilling. Vincent's schedule received. Window opens at 11:30 p.m. Clean exit guaranteed. Maya stared at the phone, her linguistics training automatically cataloguing the language patterns, the careful euphemisms, the coded references that painted a picture she desperately didn't want to see. Package delivery could mean any number of things in Vincent's world, but combined with removing obstacles and Vincent's specific schedule, the meaning was unmistakable. Tony was selling information about Vincent's return to people who wanted him dead. Maya's hands shook as she used her own phone to photograph the conversation, her mind racing through implications and consequences. Tony had worked for the Torino family for 20 years, had eaten at their table, had been trusted with their most sensitive business, and he was betraying that trust for money, setting up Vincent to be ambushed on his home territory. She was still staring at the evidence when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Maya grabbed Tony's phone and slipped into the bathroom's linen closet, pulling the door almost closed just as Tony appeared in the doorway. Through the crack, she watched him look around the bathroom with obvious confusion, checking the countertop where his phone had been. "Cazzo," he muttered in Italian, then louder. "Rosa, have you seen my phone?" Rosa's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Check your pockets, you old fool. You lose that thing 3 times a week." Maya held her breath as Tony searched his pockets, his jacket, even the bathroom drawers. When he didn't find the phone, his expression shifted from annoyed to worried. If someone had his phone, had seen those messages, the consequences would be swift and permanent. Tony left the bathroom, his footsteps hurrying down the hall toward the kitchen where he could be heard interrogating Rosa and the other staff about his missing device. Maya waited until she was certain he was gone before slipping out of the closet, Tony's phone clutched in her sweating palm. She needed to call Vincent immediately, needed to warn him about the ambush waiting for his return. But as she scrolled through Tony's contacts, looking for Vincent's number, more messages appeared on the screen. Tony's unknown contact was getting impatient. Confirm package received your intel, payment transferred, failure not option. Maya's stomach dropped as she realised the full scope of Tony's betrayal. This wasn't just about selling information. He was actively coordinating Vincent's assassination, providing real-time updates about security measures and travel schedules. And Vincent was flying back to Boston tomorrow night, completely unaware that his homecoming was being orchestrated by someone he trusted. Maya's finger hovered over Vincent's contact information when she heard Tony's voice, much closer than it should have been. "Maya, are you upstairs? I need to ask you something." Panic flooded her system. If Tony found her with his phone, if he realised she had seen those messages, she would become a liability that needed to be eliminated before Vincent's return. Maya shoved the phone into her jeans pocket and tried to think of a plausible reason for being in the upstairs hallway. "Just checking on Don Salvatore," she called back, hoping her voice sounded normal despite the terror clawing at her throat. "He seemed tired after dinner." Tony appeared at the top of the stairs, his usual jovial expression replaced by something calculating and cold. "Have you seen my phone anywhere? I thought I left it in the bathroom, but—" Maya forced herself to meet his eyes, calling on every acting skill she'd developed during years of hiding her thoughts from social workers and foster parents who might use her emotions against her. "Your phone? No, I haven't seen it. Did you check your car?" Tony studied her face with the intensity of someone who had spent decades reading people for signs of deception. Maya held his gaze, letting a trace of concern show through, not enough to seem suspicious, but enough to seem genuine. "Yeah, I'll check the car," Tony said finally, but Maya could see the doubt in his eyes. "Hey, Maya, you know you can trust me, right? If you ever see or hear anything that seems unusual around here, you'd tell me about it." The question was casual, almost friendly, but Maya heard the threat underneath it. Tony was fishing, trying to determine if she knew more than she was letting on. And if he decided she was a threat to his plans, she would disappear long before Vincent returned from New York. "Of course," Maya said, injecting just the right amount of confusion into her voice. "Is everything okay, Tony? You seem worried." "Just family business, sweetheart. Nothing for you to concern yourself with." Tony's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "But if you do happen to find my phone, bring it to me immediately. Some of my contacts are time-sensitive." Maya nodded, maintaining her expression of mild puzzlement while her mind screamed warnings. Tony was giving her a direct order, and the implication was clear. If she found his phone and didn't return it immediately, he would know she was compromised. "I'll keep an eye out for it," Maya promised. Tony studied her for another moment before nodding and heading back downstairs. Maya waited until she heard his footsteps reach the ground floor before allowing herself to shake with the full force of her terror. She was alone in a house with a man who was planning to murder Vincent, and Vincent wouldn't be back for 18 hours. Tony's contact was expecting confirmation that their package was ready for delivery, and when that confirmation didn't come, they might accelerate their timeline or send someone to investigate. Maya pulled Tony's phone from her pocket and stared at the incriminating messages, her thumb hovering over Vincent's contact. She could call him now, warn him about the ambush, tell him to stay in New York until the threat could be neutralized. But calling Vincent would mean admitting she had Tony's phone, and Tony would know immediately that his betrayal had been discovered. If Tony panicked, if he decided to cut his losses and run, he might hurt Salvatore before he left. The old man was downstairs in his study, completely unaware that his trusted employee was planning to destroy everything Salvatore had built. Maya closed her eyes and tried to think like Vincent would think, tried to channel the cold calculation that had built the Torino Empire. She needed to buy time, needed to keep Tony from realizing his phone was missing while simultaneously preventing him from confirming Vincent's assassination. Which meant she had to become someone she'd never been before, a player in a game where the stakes were measured in blood, and losing meant everyone she cared about would die. Maya deleted the conversation thread and began typing a response to Tony's contact. Her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Plans changed. Package delayed 48 hours. Maintain position and await further instructions. She sent the message, then turned off the phone and slipped it back into her pocket. With any luck, she had just bought Vincent 2 extra days to return safely and deal with Tony's betrayal. But Maya knew that luck was a finite resource in Vincent's world, and she had probably just used up her lifetime supply in a single text message. Now she had to figure out how to keep Tony from discovering his phone was missing, keep Salvatore safe from his trusted employee's true intentions, and somehow survive the next 18 hours without letting anyone know that the shy waitress from Southie had just prevented an assassination by committing treason against a traitor. Maya Chen had spent her entire life being invisible, but tonight invisibility might be the only thing standing between the Torino family and complete destruction. Vincent's return from New York was supposed to happen at 11:30 p.m. on schedule, but Maya's false message had bought them exactly 18 hours of borrowed time. Vincent walked through the front doors of his family estate at 9:15 p.m. instead, 2 hours ahead of the assassination window she had created, his expression thunderous with the kind of controlled rage that made smart people find other places to be. Maya heard the door slam from her position in Salvatore's study, where she had spent the entire day maintaining the pretense of normal routine while Tony's phone burned like a guilty secret in her pocket. She had managed to keep Tony from realizing his device was missing by claiming she had seen it in his car earlier, sending him on a wild goose chase that kept him away from the main house for most of the afternoon. But now Vincent was home, and Maya had approximately 30 seconds to decide whether to run to him with the evidence or continue playing the innocent bystander while armed men prepared to turn the estate into a battlefield. "Maya." Vincent's voice carried from the foyer, tight with barely suppressed violence. "I need to see you, now." She found Vincent in his father's study, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, gun holster visible beneath his left arm, like a promise of violence. Dom Castellano stood beside him, tablet in hand, both men radiating the kind of tension that preceded bloodshed. "Close the door," Vincent said quietly. Maya obeyed, her hand trembling slightly as she turned the lock. When she faced the room again, Vincent was studying her with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Tell me about Tony," Vincent said, without preamble. "Tell me about his phone calls, his meetings, his behaviour since I left for New York. Tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail that seemed unusual." Maya's mouth went dry. Vincent knew. Somehow, despite her careful deception, despite her attempts to buy time and protect everyone, Vincent knew about Tony's betrayal. What do you mean?" Vincent moved closer, his presence filling the space between them like heat from an open flame. "Maya, 3 hours ago I received intelligence that someone in this house has been selling information about my movements to Rico Valdez's organization. Someone with access to my schedule, my security protocols, my father's medical routine. Someone who knows exactly when I'd be vulnerable." Maya felt the world tilt sideways. Vincent's intelligence network had uncovered Tony's betrayal independently, which meant her efforts to delay the assassination might have been unnecessary. Worse, it meant Vincent suspected everyone in the household, including her. "Vincent, I would never—" "I know." The words were quiet, certain, carrying the weight of absolute trust that made Maya's chest tight with emotion. "You're not capable of that kind of betrayal, Maya, but someone is, and I need to know what you've observed." Maya pulled Tony's phone from her pocket with shaking hands. "I found this yesterday in the guest bathroom. There were text messages about package delivery, removing obstacles, your exact return schedule." She handed him the device, watching his face grow darker with each word. "Tony was selling information to someone planning to kill you." Vincent took the phone, his jaw clenching as he scrolled through the message history. Dom looked over his shoulder, both men's expressions shifting from suspicion to deadly calculation. "You've had this for 24 hours, Vincent said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" Maya met his eyes directly, calling on every ounce of courage she'd developed during years of survival. "Because calling you would have meant admitting I had his phone, and Tony would have known his cover was blown. If he panicked, if he decided to run, he might have hurt your father first. I couldn't risk Salvatore's safety." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable shifting in his expression. "So instead, you sent a false message delaying the assassination?" Maya's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Because I've been monitoring this phone number since yesterday morning, when my contact in Rico's organization warned me about unusual chatter regarding a high-value target in Lincoln." Vincent's smile was sharp, predatory. "Maya, you bought us exactly the time we needed to turn this ambush into a trap." Before Maya could process what that meant, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the study in red emergency illumination that turned everything into a horror movie set. Through the windows, Maya could see muzzle flashes in the darkness as men in tactical gear moved across the estate grounds with military precision. "They came early," Dom said grimly, speaking into his radio. "All units, we have multiple hostiles on the north perimeter. Implement lockdown protocol immediately." Vincent grabbed Maya's shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. "Safe room, now. Take my father and lock yourselves in until I come for you personally." Maya shook her head. "Where's Salvatore? Where is he right now?" "In his study, probably confused by the power outage." The sound of automatic gunfire cut through Vincent's words, close enough that the windows rattled in their frames. Maya could hear shouting, running footsteps, the kind of organised chaos that meant the estate's security was being systematically dismantled by professionals who had done this before. "They're not just here to kill you," Maya realised, her linguistic training passing the tactical commands she could hear through the broken windows. "They're speaking Spanish and Italian. Rico brought muscle from multiple organisations. This isn't an assassination, Vincent. This is a coup." Vincent's expression shifted from concerned to lethal. "They want to take over our territory by eliminating our entire leadership structure in one night." He turned to Dom. "How many men do we have on the property?" 12. They brought at least 20, maybe more. Dom's radio crackled with updates, none of them good. "Boss, they've cut our external communications and disabled the security cameras. This was planned by someone who knows our systems." Maya thought about Tony, probably hiding somewhere safe while armed men turned the estate into a battlefield, waiting to emerge once the violence was finished, to claim his 30 pieces of silver. "Vincent, we have to find your father. If they're planning a complete takeover, they'll want him alive as leverage or dead as a symbol. Either way." The study door exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear poured through the opening, automatic weapons raised, moving with the fluid coordination of a professional death squad. Maya found herself staring down the barrel of a rifle held by someone whose face was hidden behind night vision goggles and a tactical mask. "Vincent Torino," the lead gunman said, his accent confirming Maya's earlier assessment. "You're coming with us." Vincent stepped protectively in front of Maya, his hands raised, but his posture suggesting he was calculating angles and distances. "Let the girl go. She's not part of this business." "The girl stays. Rico wants to meet the little waitress who's been playing house with Boston's crime royalty." The gunman's attention shifted to Maya, and she could feel his smile beneath the mask. "He has questions about your conversation in Don Salvatore's study." Maya felt ice form in her veins. Rico hadn't forgotten their confrontation, hadn't dismissed her as unimportant. He wanted revenge for her defiance, wanted to make her pay for stepping between him and his targets. "Move," the gunman ordered, gesturing toward the door with his rifle. "Both of you, slowly." Vincent caught Maya's eye, some silent communication passing between them. Maya saw him glance toward the heavy crystal paperweight on Salvatore's desk, the same one she had grabbed as a weapon during Rico's first intrusion. Then Vincent looked at the light switch by the door, currently useless, but positioned exactly where Maya would need to be to reach the paperweight. Maya gave an almost imperceptible nod. Vincent dove left. Maya dove right, her hand closing around the crystal paperweight as the room exploded into chaos. The gunmen spun to track Vincent's movement, their weapons swinging away from Maya for exactly the 2 seconds she needed. She hurled the paperweight at the lead gunman's head with all the force and accuracy of someone who had learned to fight dirty in foster homes, where survival meant using whatever weapons were available. The crystal connected with his temple with a sound like a melon dropping, and he went down hard. Vincent was already moving, his own gun appearing in his hand as if by magic. The second gunman managed to get off 3 shots before Vincent's bullet took him centre mass, the man crumpling against the bookshelf in a cascade of leather-bound volumes and blood. The third gunman had Maya in his sights when Dom Castellano appeared in the doorway behind him, the muzzle of Dom's shotgun pressed against the back of the man's neck. "Drop it," Dom said conversationally, "or become abstract art." The gunman hesitated for exactly 1 second before Vincent put a bullet through his head. Maya stood in the sudden silence, crystal paperweight still clutched in her hand, surrounded by 3 dead men and the smell of gunpowder. Her ears were ringing from the gunshots, her hands shaking from adrenaline, but she was alive and Vincent was alive, and that was all that mattered. "Salvatore," Vincent said urgently, reloading his weapon with practiced efficiency. "We have to find my father before they do." Maya wiped blood spatter from her face and nodded grimly. The shy waitress who had served the Torino family 6 months ago was gone forever, replaced by someone who could kill to protect the people she loved and sleep soundly afterward. "Then let's go get him," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "And let's make sure Rico Valdez regrets ever hearing my name." Vincent looked at Maya, really looked at her, seeing the transformation from innocent civilian into lethal partner, and smiled with genuine admiration. "Welcome to the family business, Maya Chen.